We walk this campus with Coyote pride, on the court and in the classroom. Our ideas shape the world, and we leave our mark wherever we go, on the canvas and the community. We learn from the past to look forward, push, question, stretch, and challenge ourselves to always climb higher. We are dreamers, scholars, sculptors, innovators, and leaders. But most of all, we're Coyotes, and we define the future.
Hello, I'm Catherine Irvin, Board Chair for the Arts Connection Network, the Arts Council for San Bernardino County. I am an African-American woman with a very curly gray afro and glasses. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 State of the Arts Summit. There is a proverb: if you want to travel fast, go alone. If you want to travel far, go with friends. It is my pleasure at this time to thank our many friends, our patrons and sponsors who have supported our travels this year. Our summit partners, the California Arts Council, Music Changing Lives, and the Riverside Arts Council. Our patron sponsors, the City of Ontario Office of Community Life and Culture, Cal State San Bernardino, Dwight Tate, the Inland Empire Community Foundation, and the County of San Bernardino. Our sustainer partners, the Arts Area, the Center for Business and Management of the Arts at Claremont Graduate University, the Morongo Basin Cultural Arts Council, National Core, and Omnitrans. Our advocate sponsors, Chaffee Community Museum of Art, the College of Arts and Letters at CSU San Bernardino, the Maloof Foundation, Poetically Adorned Apparel, and the Wignall Museum of Contemporary Art, and for the support of 2nd District Supervisor Janice Rutherford and 3rd District Supervisor Dawn Rowe. A special thanks to all of you for your presence and your attention to the important work of uplifting the arts in our region. And now, a welcome to our next speaker, Vanessa Vizard, Board Chair of Music Changing Lives.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 State of the Arts Summit. I'm Vanessa Vizard, board member for Music Changing Lives and CEO and founder of Vizard Marketing and PR. I am so excited to be here with you today for the first ever dual county celebration of the arts, brought to you by the Arts Connection, Riverside Arts Council, Music Changing Lives, and Arts for IE. Before we get started, I'm going to give a brief description of myself for anyone who is visually impaired and might be on the call. I am a woman in my late 30s. I have brown, curly, wavy hair just past my shoulders, and I'm wearing a short sleeve plum shirt. I would like to thank everyone for being a part of today's summit. You could have been anywhere, but you're here with us, and we appreciate it. I promise you won't regret it. We have an incredible summit lined up with speakers, panelists, and performers. We have legislative updates both at the regional and state level. We have awards that will be given out, so congratulations to those who have been selected as our artists as second responders. And we also have some amazing talent. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce our first performer. His name is Brandon Allen. He is a poet, a spoken word artist, a writer, an actor, a fashion designer, and he's going to be performing This Little Boy.
You know, the truth is, life has a way of trying to take our stories and making them feel like nothing. We have an opportunity to leave something in this world that lasts beyond us, to leave legacy, to make impact, to make our stories matter. We watch celebrities And people pour out everything they have, and we wonder and wonder how they got to that space. The truth is, we don't know their stories. We don't know their struggles. Chadwick Boseman suffered 4 years with a debilitating disease, and yet he gave us everything he had. People struggle, you struggle and overcome. Right now, the world struggles together through anxiety, through pressures, through everything that's coming from this election, through everything that we're thinking through. Yet, when it's all said and done, when it ends, what will your legacy say about you? Your sphere is waiting for you. Your community is waiting for you. Your people are waiting for you. You are made to make impact. My question is when the credits roll and your movie ends, what will they say about your story? When we were kids, we always imagined what our stories would be like, what our life would be like. And life had a way of trying to trap the little boys and little girls that we were. The reality is that your sphere needs you, people need you, and the little boy and little girl inside of you needs you. This poem isn't just about an awakening of myself, but it's about an awakening of every single little boy and little girl whose voice was trapped, stolen, and made to feel like its story would never matter, because everyone's story matters. This poem is called This Little Boy. Y'all remember my first real poem? I sat at the computer while my tears stroked the keyboard, my pain unlaid within the stanzas, and my anger lashed out in metaphors. I repeated why from line to line, questioning the character and purpose to God's design. Like this one individual couldn't belong to me. I mean, I thought this one distributor of sorrows and agony couldn't be cut from the same cloth as me. I mean, how did I ride from those loins? And couldn't he see that my bloodshed didn't match that from which he came to be? But yet this was my reality. And it didn't belong in your picture-perfect TV sitcom. See, I grew up in a different world where my family matters didn't fit, and how my brother, mother, cousin, and uncle feel would shake up my wheel. See, I was no Fresh Prince, and my life was unfamiliar, so these different strokes would wither away in my good times. And I had no clue where I fit in. In fact, I had a skewed image of what a black man was supposed to look like. In fact, I didn't even like how I looked, so the image of anything was better than this. This is a story of an unidentified human project that was molded into something that nobody could recognize. He became a reflection of what was popular at the moment and always dressed in his best self-consciousness, wrapped in how many different shades of fake could his facade portray. Yet no one took notice. No eyes cut to his cuts that were more similar to battle wounds. He laid prostrate on a mattress made of empty solemnness. He dug holes into his soul, praying someone would come fill his voids, yet he didn't even know how to pray. He repeated practice redundancies, hoping someone heard him scream with urgency, "Please, help me." Yet silence begets silence, and in all muffled his destiny, this little boy was dying, and no one would come to his rescue, so this little boy had to discover how to tend to his own wounds. He was left mangled, a hideous atrocity. Yet if you look for his disfigurements, I promise that you wouldn't see. This little boy cried on the inside and was flooding internally and left little room for his feelings, so he wore his emotions on his sleeve. This little boy wasn't taught to swallow things like his pride, and he never understood why they called them memories, because he remembered everything as if life was stuck on repeat, as if life was stuck on repeat, as if life was stuck on repeat. This little boy followed the wrong path, because for a minute the road to death seemed a little more pleasing. This little boy thought accolades and self-humiliating behaviors would make life more easy. This little boy was poisoned by pornography and thought love was spelled S-E-X, so he tried to repeat the things he would see. This little boy was lonely and would constantly talk to strangers because at least they heard him speak. This little boy still survives, although he tried to die repeatedly. I'll introduce you to this little boy because he still resides inside you. Hi, I'm this little boy. Nice to meet you. I remember my first real poem. I sat at the computer while my tears stroked the keyboard, my pain unlaid within the stanzas, and my anger lashed out in metaphors, but then I found God. So for my pain, my past, and my future, this little boy refuses to cry. Thank you. My name is Brandon Allen. You can find me on all social media as When Thunder Speaks. I want you to know that your life is speaking, and everything you do matters. Tell your story through all of your gifts and leave legacy. Thank you.
I feel like I should, for everybody in the audience, do some clapping. So thank you so much for sharing that, Brandon. It sets a nice tone for our summit, and thank you. My name is Jennifer Kane. I am the Executive Director of Arts Connection, the San Bernardino County Arts Council. I am a woman in my late 30s with light blonde or dark blonde brown hair, tied up in a bun with long earrings to my shoulders, wearing a flowered short sleeve shirt. In the background is some artwork and an illuminated lamp. I am pleased to be here today to share with you the annual arts report for 2021. And I'd like to introduce my fellow speaker, Mr. Patrick Bryan.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Patrick Bryan. I'm the Executive Director of the Riverside Arts Council. I am a male in my late, we're going to disregard that point. And I have dark brown hair. I am wearing a black suit with a blue shirt and blue tie. Behind me, you'll see a bookcase with all sorts of sundry things, including a skull from when I played Claudius in Hamlet. And we're thrilled to be doing this, our first annual Regional Arts and Cultural Summit. So we're going to go directly into PowerPoint. And this actually is something where we're going to be unveiling our annual report. Many thanks to everyone who has participated over the past year. We've actually got way too many people to name by name, but you'll see many of them right over here. Without your support, all of the work that we've done would seriously not have been possible. So thank you. You'll see here that we have a gathering of different dots. Now, this is actually based on a survey that we did. These are the responses that we got, and you'll see the geographic representation along with the urban layout of it. From all of the responses, that's the cue from which we are taking the work that we're going to be doing over the next year. So the purpose of the report that you are about to learn more about is really to give you a picture of ourselves as an arts and cultural community and what we need to do over the next 5 to 10 years in order to expand the good work that everyone's been doing.
Thanks, Patrick. We'd also like to acknowledge that a lot of this work was done through the various convenings which we hosted over the last year, which were about 12, and some of those were in partnerships with Californians for the Arts. So some of the things that we learned is that arts and culture organizations serve a wide variety of our communities and a wide audience. So we had 76 participants in the survey. For both regions or both counties, we have about 255 organizations. So the numbers that you're seeing represent those 76 organizations that were surveyed. If you amplify the numbers of residents that participated in free events, we would get close to 1 million residents taking or benefiting from the services of the arts and culture organizations in the region. Some of the things that we recognized or noticed was that the services and programs that organizations provide they're not really just doing one thing. So they're doing 2 or more types of activities, and they're often overlapping those activities with arts education programs. They're providing public events, oftentimes in partnership with city, county, or local community organizations. And they're providing key gathering locations, events, including theater and musical performances. One thing to note is it's interesting that a lot of them don't own their own spaces. They rent them, their spaces are donated, and even a lot of these organizations are mobile. They actually adapt to new spaces and venues. For example, there's an organization called Place Performance that places themselves in public settings, and they do a partnership called the Riverside Trolley dances, where they show up and do their performances in public spaces on those trolley cars. So they are adaptive, they provide education, they are just always changing and always resilient. And they do this on a remarkably small budget. So as you can see on the left, there's 2 rainbow colored charts in front of us with different numbers. So this is in case you can't see. On the left, the organizations that 59% of them surveyed operate with budgets of $50,000 or less. And then even due to COVID, they expect those budgets to decrease even further due to the impacts of COVID-19. And in response to just making sure I'm doing the right slides, this is my last one. All right. So there was a variety of responses to what happened with COVID, with the shutdown. Immediately, organizations had to adapt. They had to refocus their programming. A lot of them didn't feel comfortable doing fundraising with the shutdowns, with people's incomes drastically impacted. And almost half of them transitioned within 1 to 2 months to virtual programming. On the left, you'll see a grid of artists and arts leaders up in the Morongo Basin, led by Rhonda Coleman, who has started Groundwork Arts. They serve the Morongo Basin Unified School District to offer arts education classes. Before the pandemic, they were doing this in person with limited services because they were going in person. So the success story of COVID, even though it put a lot of pressure on organizations, is that it also forced them to adapt, which actually increased their audience. So now this organization is offering virtual classes to more students. Close to 1,800 students are now enjoying arts education because of the push to moving to virtual lessons. And I'll toss it over to Patrick.
All right, so we'll see that on the right-hand side, we have a chart of the organizations that have received funding from the California Arts Council. These are based on 2018 figures. Statewide, 1,300 applications were submitted for a total grant pool of $24 million. Out of that $24 million, San Bernardino County actually only received 10 grants for a total of $126,000. Riverside County received 14 grants for $329,000. That's a very small amount of money. It means that there's a lot of organizations that are just simply not applying in large respect because they're not aware. On the left, you'll see a chart that gives us a little bit of encouragement, however. So 58 organizations received funding through the San Bernardino County Nonprofit Assistance Fund. 65 from Riverside. So it shows that more people were aware, more people followed through with the applications, And it gives us, I think, hope for the future that these people are going to do like they said that they would and begin to take advantage of some more opportunities. We just need to do a better job of making sure that they know about them. And you can move on to the next slide, Jenny. So you'll see here that we've got a graph of where money is given and who the top 10 funders are of arts and culture in this region. How many people have actually heard of all of these funders? That's a problem right there. We need to make sure that more people know about them. And you'll see that education receives by far the largest amount of money. Health and Human Services, right up there. The arts, we're there, but we don't really approach those other ones. The question really is, how can we partner together in order to better access some of these funds? Because you that are part of this summit today, you recognize that you yourselves overlap with your programming in arts education, in health and human services. How many times do people offer things such as the Riverside Arts Council does for inmates of state prisons, for people suffering from dementia, for adults with developmental disabilities? Others have these types of programs as well. You can move on to the next slide, Jenny. So this is an important quote to remember. The development we seek will not happen in collaboration, will happen in collaboration, not in isolation. Too often we, in this region, in this industry, tend to operate in silos. We tend to look upon other art forms as competition, even people within our art forms as competition. That's a mindset that we need to change.
Thanks, Patrick. So part of the survey also included some open-ended survey questions. And I want to thank the students at Cal State San Bernardino, Joshua Craig, Concepcion Rodriguez, and their faculty advisor who helped us analyze those open-ended questions. Key themes emerged from those questions that really speak to simple phrases that we kind of hear over and over again. And so we'll kind of dive into maybe what those could actually look like for the arts community. One of the things is that we know we need to develop more sustainable collaborative funding sources. One of the things that sparked our work to do this in the first place was that we noticed that funding in LA County, especially around COVID, there was ample funds to support the arts. And 12 million from the county alone, and the California Community Fund also helped seed the LA Arts Recovery Fund at $38 million. And we said, how come that isn't happening in our region? How can we change that? How can we create something together? We're running out of time, and that always happens. So we'll slide through these a little quickly. So we realized that we kind of stay in silos. The arts community's over here, residents, city, county electeds are over on the other side. And we need to merge the two in order to figure out and solve how can we really integrate the arts into the broader thinking about civic life.
Okay, so there have been some interesting things, obviously, that have happened with all of us over the last year with COVID. Some tremendous success stories have grown out of this as well. In Palm Springs, we've got the Palm Springs Dance Company, Chad and Michael, that have, through not being able to actually offer performances, still managed to open a performance studio. And are in the process of developing a fantastic performance venue. Josiah Bruni, Vanessa Vizard with Music Changing Lives, they recognized a need, and in addition to what they've already been doing, they started doing food distribution and clothing distribution. They did a tremendous toy drive over the holidays. You can move on, Jenny. Yeah,
and this will have to be our last slide too.
Okay, so this is our last slide. And many thanks to each of you who have participated over the past year. We look forward to being able to move on with you into the future together. And Jenny?
Yep.
Back over to you.
We have so much more, and I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of it today, but you're going to get all of this in a written report straight to your inbox. So don't worry about that. So we're going to slide right into another dynamic, amazing speaker, Julie Baker, who is here to talk about statewide updates. And I'm going to stop my screen share. So I'm going to introduce Julie. Julie Baker is the Executive Director of Californians for the Arts, California Arts Advocates. She also serves as the state champion for Americans for the Arts, the National Arts Action Summit, and is the chair of the Visibility Committee for the State Arts Action Network. I can't say enough about Julie Baker being our champion for the entire state. And if you don't know Julie, you should follow her on all platforms, because she is literally working for every single artist and every single arts organization at the state level. And I'm just so grateful that she's here to speak today.
Jenny, Patrick, it's my true pleasure to be here today. And you guys are awesome and part of our board. I just want to say that this community is extremely well represented at the state level with Patrick, Jenny, and Josiah Bruni on the board of Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. So making sure that, as Jenny said, arts are integrated into civic life and into these conversations and discussions, both at the state and local level, is so critical. So I wanted to give you a quick update. As we are in the arts, we're always overly ambitious, and so we have a lot going on. And so let me give you a quick update on what's happening at the state level in terms of the budget, first of all. So today is a big day. At 10:30 a.m., the Governor Gavin Newsom, will make his May revise of the budget. That is where he has been sort of giving a little bit of announcements all week long and telling people what to expect. In that, for example, the other day, we got an announcement that there is a budget proposal for Clean California, and that would actually be where he would employ formerly homeless, formerly incarcerated, graduating youth from high schools to help clean up California, but also to incorporate arts and culture projects to beautify California. And it's a $1.5 billion project over the next 3 years that he's proposing to the legislature. So that's just one of the previews that we've seen so far. We're also hearing that he's expanding the California Relief Grant Program, which we were able to fight for specific funds for cultural institutions this last round 4, for $50 million. So our work continues. What we've done in this last several months is we've joined in coalition with NIVA, National Independent Venues Association of California, as well as California Association of Museums, to fight for a $1 billion investment in arts, culture, and live events in the state of California. And this is an investment that we're looking at for the next 2 to 4 years. And it's part of what we call the American Rescue Plan funds. As you may be aware, the governor announced not only has the state a budget surplus of $76 billion, and that is from income tax and other revenues throughout the state, but we also are receiving $26 billion from the federal government in the form of these ARP funds. And what's critical right now to recognize is that there's a lot of money here in the state of California, and it's time for the arts and culture industry to actually be invested in and be recognized for the impact that we make in every community in California, and how there will be no recovery of your community without a ripe and healthy arts and culture corridor. Not only do we benefit the economic recovery of every community with all the ancillary benefits of restaurants, hotels, travel, tourism, and so on, we also know the incredible amount of mental health and public health and social impact that we make, and how critical it is that we are finally seen and recognized for that work. We are also, in terms of legislation, so one thing I just want to say is that follow along with us as we continue to see what happens today at 10:30 and what the governor introduces. And then if there isn't the funding that we're hoping for in terms of increase to both the California Arts Council, to the CCHE program, which helps museums, specifically to independent venues. That's all part of our budget package for the $1 billion over the next 2 to 4 years. It would also be increased funding for cultural districts. It would be increased funding to expand the cultural districts program and to expand existing programs for the California Arts Council. Because right now they're actually only funding about 12% of California's arts nonprofits. The funding that they receive is $26 million a year. It's 73 cents per capita. We are systemically undercapitalized as an industry. We're dependent upon the philanthropy. And as we know, in certain sectors of the state, in regional areas like yours, that philanthropy can't match the need. And that is why it's so critical that there's public funding for the arts. And it really is an access and equity issue for everyone to have access to the arts. I want to go to the slides that I have prepared, just a couple to give you an idea of how you can pitch for your own local and state ARP advocacy, because there's a lot of money coming into every city and county in California as well. And of course, you should also contact Patrick and Jenny in terms of what they're doing to coordinate your efforts. And also finally, I just want to mention one other thing that I meant to say, which is we are also sponsoring and supporting two bills. One is Senate Bill 628, which is the California Creative Workforce Act, and Senate Bill 805, which is the Performing Arts Rescue Plan, which essentially is a way to address the impact of AB 5 on our small budget arts organizations. A lot more to report on those, but there's limited time. So if we can go to the next slide, this just kind of gives you an overview of what ARP is. And that is, of course, the American Rescue Plan that was passed on March 11th. And it is a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus bill with lots of money to both counties and cities and states. Next slide. So just a quick, there's lots of, and this, and I was happy to send this, Jenny has this that you can, and it's accessible on our website, californiansforthearts.org, but it gives you an idea of what this money is intended for. Maybe some of you remember the CARES Act funding that came last year as well, and it had very specific restraints. This money seems to have fewer restraints on it. And so there's really a way for us as the arts to make sure that we get access to these monies. I'm not going to read these out to you. I'm sure you can all hopefully see it. And I apologize. I also meant to describe who I am sitting here in my room, in my office in Nevada City, California, on the land of the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan. And I'm a woman in her early 50s with long brown hair, yellow glasses, and surrounded by visual art of original artists, mostly from California. And we can go to the next slide. So this will give you also some ideas of how much and by when, and I apologize that I don't have the numbers specifically in front of me for your community, but it's very easy to access how much is coming into your community from from ARP funds. And so, part of being a good advocate, which is part of what Californians for the Arts hopes to help you become, is to be informed, and is to be informed of what's happening in terms of public funding, because it is your money, it is your taxpayer money, and it is when budgets are determined, it really is a set of values by your local politicians and elected officials, or your state elected officials, saying what it is they're prioritizing. And as we know, it is our job to fight to make sure that arts and culture are prioritized. So we'll go to the next slide. So one of the things that I want to just say is that you really have to get on this right now. This is urgent. It's happening in your communities. They're making the determinations. Build your case, data and storytelling. Jenny, Patrick, others have this information, so make sure you access it. Come with ideas and a plan ready to go. Here's how we can integrate into X, Y, and Z. Learn what they are prioritizing in your local community. Maybe it is beautifying the streets, cleaning up, garbage along the area. How can artists be a part of that conversation and part of the solution? We're big on arts integration. We're big on arts being seen as part of the solution. One of the things that Arts for LA has done very successfully, your neighboring regional advocacy organization, has been to get a resolution from their city council and board of supervisors to ensure that there's an allocation of federal funds to arts and culture. You can reach out to your arts community ecosystem and make a coalition ask, which is what we've done at the state level. So who else could you be working with? And also think about like-minded, travel, tourism, environmental, other organizations that you can really work with to make an impact. And then connect with us, your statewide advocacy organization, and people like Jenny and Patrick. Next slide. So these are just some ways that you can tell your story. Again, you heard me in the beginning talk about how our local economies will benefit from a healthy arts and culture sector. It always amazes me how our elected officials need to be reminded of these things over and over and over again. And it's not because they don't care or they're not necessarily aware. It's just they have so many issues ahead of them and so many issues that they're dealing with that they certainly can't be the expert on all of them. That's our job. Our job is to be the experts on our industry and to make the case of why this is good investment, this is a good use of taxpayer dollars, and how we can make these monies go further when we invest in arts and culture. I think the other thing that's really important with ARP funds is they really do focus on who's been disproportionately impacted by COVID. And we can certainly make the case that arts and culture has been. We have all the data to point to that, and how it also is going to take us longer to recover because so much of our work is about gathering. And even with the progress that we've made on COVID-19, we know that our audiences are still wary and that it's going to cost us a lot of money to get restarted. There's also a lot of information about creative jobs being critical to the future of work. Innovation is crucial to competition. Creativity is integral to innovation, and this is one of the most in-demand short supply skill sets that we need out there, especially as we get into more automation, robots. And of course, we all know this as we do this work, which is how important arts and creativity are to our health and our well-being. And we have a lot of evidence to that. Go to the next slide, please. And this is just a quick how you can show also the specific, if you do events, what kind of economic impact your event makes. Next slide. It's over $31 per person per event. Again, arts are jobs, arts are labor, arts are real work. This is not just a hobby. This is an integral piece of how we recover our communities. Artists are our second responders. We are essential workers. In fact, we just got a resolution passed with the state Senate on artists being second responders, which we're happy to share. This is an industry that has long been undercapitalized, and now is the time to invest in a future that prioritizes racial and cultural equity, to tell the stories that have traditionally not been told or funded, and to create an equitable vision for American culture. We are a valuable social service and should be funded and contracted as we do other social services, and artists provide value. This Clean California, for example, is showing that we can integrate into maybe transportation and other things that are out there in terms of government agencies. So look to see what your local government is prioritizing and where they're funding. Next slide. And this is just going to give you some resources, places that you can look to, and our website, of course, is going to give that to you as well. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I want to be mindful of staying on time, as I know you have an amazing day ahead of you. And I'm just so grateful to Patrick and to Jenny and to Josiah, Bruni, who are all on our board, the impact and the commitment that they make to advancing arts, culture, and creative industries in the state of California. And I hope that you'll join us at CaliforniansForTheArts.org. We are really trying to do everything we can to fight for these resources for the sector. And now it is my pleasure to introduce James C. Ramos, California State Assembly member of the 40th District.
Oh, go naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, go naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, naiva, you ever naiva man, go naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, naiva, you ever naiva man, go naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, naiva, you ever naiva man, go naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, go naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, naiva, you ever naiva man, go naiva, you ever naiva man, oh, naiva, Just want to do a land acknowledgement for all the Indian people that are tuning in for this Zoom and this webinar, this Arts Council presentation, and also for the Serrano people from this area, the Morongo Basin. Athuviatam Serrano, Yohaviatam Serrano, but we are offering this song as land acknowledgement for all the tribes that have made their way through these territories. On behalf of myself, Yohaviatam Serrano, land acknowledgement is done. I also been asked to talk about the baskets that were repatriated back to the people of Santos Manuel. I believe there's about 25 baskets that were repatriated back from the San Bernardino County Museum. These baskets were woven through my great-great-grandmother's hands, Jesus Emmanuel, and we were able to get those baskets back. And some say, well, those baskets are better served in different museums so that more community members can see them. But when it comes from our people that wove those baskets, getting them back into the hands of Indian people means so much more that others can't really understand, because now pieces of those, our ancestors, have been returned back to us. And it instills into our young people the ability to move forward and see what their great-great-grandmothers have done, and many times their great-great-great-grandmothers have done. So it instills in our younger people to move forward and start to weave baskets just as our ancestors have done. These are reasons why we continue to push bills like AB 275 that deals with repatriation of getting remains back to the hands of the rightful people, the Indian people in the state of California. These are things that we continue to work on. These are things that I'm looking forward to working with the Morongo Basin and arts councils throughout the area. And also with Music Changing Lives. The song that I was able to sing today is a prayer song, and a bighorn sheep song that we talked about. Also acknowledging people in our presence. Music plays a great testimony to our culture. And as music continues to move forward, it plays a big part in our young people and throughout all communities. So music is something that's driven here, and we just sang those songs, and we continue to sing songs in our culture. I want to thank you for inviting me to say a few words on behalf of the State Assembly and the Speaker of the Assembly, Speaker Rendon. My name is James Ramos, and I'm the Assembly member for the 40th Assembly District, and the first California Indian ever elected in the state of California.
Hi, I'm Anthony Parnther, and I'm the music director and conductor of your San Bernardino Symphony. During the day, I have the opportunity to record and conduct the soundtrack and musical scores of many of the movies and television shows consumed worldwide. I'm the music director and conductor of 5 symphony orchestras here in the state of California, and I've had the privilege of guest conducting orchestras on 6 continents. But arguably, the most rewarding part of my career were definitely my early years spent as a music teacher. And having taught at the high school and collegiate level, I went on and spent 5 years as the founding music director and conductor of the Young Musicians Choral Orchestra up north in Berkeley, California. It was the only program of its kind in the world. So we set about and we recruited and admitted students who could either play an instrument or sing. There were ages 8 through 18 from all throughout the inner city of the East Bay. And the group was 95% Black and Latino students, and they were all from households that were at or under the national poverty threshold. But one of the unique features about this group is that I had the opportunity to teach the students who were singers how to play orchestra instruments, and those who were instrumentalists had to learn how to sing. So everyone sang and everyone played. And no other orchestra that I'm aware of does such a thing. So what does such an orchestra look and sound like? Allow me to share. So, in addition to imbuing these young students with musical prowess, we invested in their academic reinforcement and personal development. And through the structure of the orchestra, all of these students learn concepts that, quite frankly, could never be gleaned in a math or social studies class. They learn that to excel in music takes discipline. And if you sit at the front of a violin or trumpet section, that leadership is required of you. And in order for 100 musicians to sound together, it takes cooperation. And through their voice or instrument, they have the power to express themselves or to dive into their creativity. You know, these are all things that are not necessarily being developed in all of the other vocations. So, for example, I want to take this as an example. A student who's taking an English test might fail on their own accord. And who does that affect? It only affects that one English student. It doesn't affect anybody else in the classroom. But one unprepared cymbal player brings the other 99 musicians down with them if they fail to perform their part. So musicians, whether they're in an orchestra or a choir, rely on each other in order to make beautiful music. They must all unite under one banner for the good of the whole. I deeply wish that every member of Congress was in an orchestra or a choir, but that's another thing. So I remember when I had the opportunity to take these students across the Bay Bridge to perform at the Yerba Buena Center in San Francisco, almost none of them had actually been across that bridge before. So taking them across the country for the first time, as you can imagine, was absolutely life-changing. So music was the opportunity for nearly all of these students to travel beyond their own neighborhood for the first time and see the world. So what did assimilating these young, underprivileged Black and brown kids in a music program like ours do beyond giving them musical ability? Well, we maintained a 100% high school graduation rate in our program. Nearly 50% of the students in our program attained a 4.0 GPA or higher. And over the period of 5 years while I was there, the graduating seniors collected about $7.5 million in scholarship offerings. So our students went on to attend schools like Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, Juilliard, UCLA, USC, and virtually all of the top music schools and conservatories in the United States. Almost 100% of these students were the first to ever attend college. And I specifically remember that at one of my final concerts with the Young Musicians Choral Orchestra, a well-known and well-feared, quite frankly, Oakland gang member attended the concert for the very first time. And this man, who I distinctly remember, was covered head to toe in tattoos, and he was wearing carpenter pants and a white tank top and all these chains. By the end of our choir rendition of My Soul's Been Anchored in the Lord, he was in tears. And he comes up to me after the concert and he said, "That was my son in the tenor section, and he will have a better life than me because of this program." And he was right. His son, Edward, graduated cum laude from the University of Michigan in 2019. So while I could go on and on for some time about the hardcore data and statistics that a classical music training does for our youth, music itself at its core principle serves a much simpler but far more profound role in our society. We as musicians create beauty and we share it. We create beauty and we share it. It's that plain and simple. And the kind of music that we train rigorously our entire lives to perfect and perform here at the San Bernardino Symphony engages the intellect and uplifts the spirit. And not all music does that. So we have evidence that by opening our halls and sharing this music with our community, that music truly can transform and unite a community. It can change and save lives. It can open doors. It can cross bridges, soften hearts, and champion humanity. The only difference between privileged and underprivileged is opportunity. And now it is my great pleasure to present the Artists as Second Responders Awards. In the words of Julie Baker, Executive Director of Californians for the Arts, first responders save lives. Second responders help put people's lives together. Artists are essential workers in our society and our economy, helping us recover, reflect, and rebuild. In an effort to celebrate the work of artists and art organizations created over the past year, addressing racial injustice and/or in response to COVID-19, Arts for IE put out a call for entries to artists and organizations living or working in San Bernardino or Riverside counties. The incredible work carried out across both counties exemplified the power of the arts to help bring hope and healing to our communities. It is my honor to introduce the award winners for the 2021 Artists as Second Responders Awards. The Artists as Second Responder Award winners are choreographer Tula B. Strong and songwriter and performer Ana Rodriguez for their original song and performance of Tears. Lift Our Voices for their Be the Change social justice writing workshops. Inland Civil Rights for their John Lewis Memorial Mural. Honorable mention and award winners are the Inlandia Institute for their collaborative community poetry and e-chapbook Pandemic Spring. Mon Petit Mojave for their free community drive-in concerts. So, in addition to a cash award, awardees will receive tickets to the San Bernardino Symphony Orchestra. We look forward to having you with us. Congratulations and thank you for your service, and we extend our appreciation to all the artists and arts organizations in San Bernardino and Riverside counties. And now, let's hear a word from our award winners.
Hello, my name is Tula B. Strong. I am a performance artist whose work is focused on weaving dance, storytelling through music, and faith. I would like to start off today just by saying thank you so much for selecting me and my work as one of the Artists as Second Responders awardees. I am so honored and excited to share this work with you all. Within this past year, this country has collectively experienced the trauma of watching the countless heartbreaking murders of Black and brown people. My work as an artist during this time is not just passionately committed to reflecting the inherent worth of Black lives, but also to passionately highlighting our need to heal fully and collectively. That mission of healing is the catalyst behind the work I'm sharing with you all today. This work you will see is entitled Tears, and it is an excerpt from my current dance musical theater show in development called Testimony. It is a piece that is collaborative. The spoken word was written by Elsie Dortelis and performed by Sydney Wilmore. The song was written and performed by Ana Rodriguez. The videography and photography was taken by Marcus Brown Jr. The work is produced by myself, and the featured choreography was created by me in collaboration with my dancers and choreographic partners, Naima Patterson, Jasmine Stanley, Clara August, Asia Desert, Scarlett Leone, and Genesis Jackson. If you like what you witnessed today, I would love to invite you to sign up for the official premiere of this work, which will occur tentatively in early 2022. You can do that by visiting bit.ly/testimony2022. Lastly, as you watch, I'd like to leave you with the lesson of this song. Tears reminds us that we must acknowledge the trauma we have experienced in order to move forward and heal completely. Thank you.
You pound your head against the wall, wondering where you went wrong. Why did you care so much? It wasn't the pounding that caused your pain. The issue is between those veins and the lining of their hearts where empathy should have existed. Instead, you're here, trying to find the answer within these walls, knowing you won't get one, but praying you get something close.
To bathe in my worries and suffocate in pain. So take all your time, no need to hurry. Pluck away my pain and wash away the worries, the hurting and the tears, the tears, the tears.
Hello. Thank you for this award. and recognizing the value art plays in our community. Thank you to the committee for the time it took reviewing the participants and voting. My name is James Coates, and my organization is Lift Our Voices Education. I submitted a poem as a sample of the kind of writing generated in our workshops. When racial injustice reached a tipping point in 2020, as an artist, I questioned how I could contribute to the fight for equity. I resolved to produce a book aimed at tackling racism and the oppressive systems head-on through poetry. While developing the book, I realized that the book could only do so much work. We needed a place to discuss the topics in the book. I wanted a more creative dialogue to occur, where people could express how they were feeling as a way of healing, while learning where they could use their own privilege to lift others. Out of that idea, the Be the Change Social Justice Writing Workshop was born. The workshop occurs on the first Wednesday of each month, 6 p.m. Pacific. It is a name-your-own-price model so that the community can access it despite their financial circumstances. What is most notable about the sessions is the high quality of poetry generated, the authentic and vulnerable discussions of how we can show up better for the world. We hope to continue to grow, eventually offering workshops for the youth and other artistic disciplines beyond writing to create radical change in ourselves and our community through activism. So now I'm going to read the poem for you, In This America. Today's difference we focus on demonizing is labeled Chinese. Hate for them, red as devil's eyes rising like dross in the flame of this pandemic. Every Asian accent becomes a target to launch slurs like misinformed missiles. This isn't World War II, but the bodies are still dropping in this country. Animosity is a deadly disease. Not limited to this year, it's been here for centuries. The prevailing sentiment irradiates this land in toxic fallout, a sickening testament. Grandmas and grandpas are not safe from being beaten to death in the streets. Vietnamese and Koreans, all Asians can feel the heat of our spreading racism. Since the camp's already built for those of color, we'll use this pandemic, or at least the panic. Leadership igniting terror to blaze bold and bright as privilege. Ongoing war waged against the Asian community from 1942 internment to 1882 exclusion. Fear the kerosene fueling delusion. Burning like a fever that melts meager morality. A Chinese virus did not cause this country's epidemic. 2021 xenophobia does. Because disdain for immigrants has never been new. It's what we do in this America.
Hi, I am Katie Porter, Executive Director of Inlandia Institute. I am also a poet. And at the beginning of the pandemic, when there were so many uncertainties and we were all sheltering at home, I did what I often do when I am uncertain or when I need to contemplate something. I turned to poetry. I, on a whim, posted a Facebook post that called for people to contribute a line of poetry, just one line, and to post it as a comment on that thread. And at the end of the day, that I would take those separate comments, separate lines, and compile them into a single unified poem. So I did that on the first day of our shelter at home orders. And then I did it again on the second day. And day by day, our contributor list grew to the point that we had contributors from all over the country, and including, poets and people who already consider themselves writers, to just people who were at home, some of my own family members and friends, all of us who were all in this together sheltering at home, just trying to get by. In the end, toward the end of spring, when we were heading into May, of course, we had a lot going on at that point with social justice and civil unrest and the death and murder of George Floyd. And it just seemed like a natural place to stop at the end of 75 days. We just wanted to make some space for other things that were going on, and we didn't know how much time we might be in this shelter at home. But we took those 75 poems and we compiled them into a chapbook that we were able to share online. The very first poem in the book was Elegy for TP, a villanelle, which, as we all recall, toilet paper was in short supply, but we had quite a few different poems written, quite a few different topics, all of them, or almost all of them, related to what was going on in the world. And that's our list of contributors, very long. And we just thank the Arts in the IE for honoring us with this honorable mention in this Arts as a Second Responder project. Thank you.
We want to thank the San Bernardino Arts Council for selecting Mon Petit Mojave as a recipient of the award. It's been such an honor to create this space for the community, and we also want to make sure we shout out our team of volunteers and staff that have worked hard and diligently to produce safe events for the community, and also all of our local sponsors, business sponsors, and the community itself that has donated to the concerts to keep live music alive. To all of our wonderful artists for coming out to the desert to perform. It's just been such an amazing experience, and we really hope to be able to continue the series and continue to bring more art, more music to this community.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? My name is Josiah Bruni. I am the CEO and founder of Music Changing Lives. I'm a young African-American male. I'm in a plaid jacket, pink shirt, and I have an art poster behind me of James Baldwin that was done by a local artist, Layla Creates. I want to first thank the Arts Connection and Riverside Arts Connection as well for hosting this event and allowing Music Changing Lives to play a part. I also want to thank the 60 participants that have purchased tickets and those that opted out to send a donation to Arts for IE. I'm being updated that about $400 will now go to the Arts Fund for local artists here in the Inland Empire, which is a great attribute. So thank you all so much for your support. This project, Arts for IE, was created back, well, let's go back a little bit. I was with Karthnik of UCR's, a professor at UCR, and he was doing a program called DNA, where we learned about our data, our narrative, and then our actions. And at the time, we were all being drilled on the effects of the lack of funding that were coming into the Inland Empire. We had the James Irving Foundation that were teaching us that our per capita of dollars that were coming in was very low. And it was about $3, if I'm not mistaken, per capita, something of that nature. But it was really low. It was lower than LA and lower than Sacramento and San Francisco. So I immediately started doing my research and seeing why this was. And I noticed it was simply because organizations in those regions were unifying, and they were collaborating on one forward. And they were saying it's time for us to know our true cost value so that we can do this work efficiently and be paid the wages that we deserve to be paid as philanthropists in our region that are changing lives. And so I noticed a couple of models that were built in Oakland and Sacramento, and I started following and researching them with students from UCR. And we developed what's now known as One Inland Empire. It's a community collaborative where it's about 30 organizations that are focused on building productive citizens within the Inland Empire and beyond, and creating replication models that we could take across our region and then one day across the state and hopefully one day across the nation with the proper support. That then led to us creating a hand up, not a handout, which is a policy that we're asking to be implemented with our governor and our state for a local, regional, a public-private partnership that will start here locally and then branch out throughout all of California. And this is basically coming in again and looking at our true cost value, every partner at the table focused on bringing productive programs to the table that are focused on wellness in our current community centers that we service, and then branching out and serving in our greatest capacity so that programs could essentially become free for those in need, and we can serve to the max capacity that we're able to. After that, that led to a program called Empowerment to Policy, where California Endowment came in and helped us fund a private survey to figure out what were the 5 top issues in our region and what were the 5 policies that we could use to change those issues as well. From that survey, we've seen that hunger was the biggest issue because we were just finishing it up in the middle or at the beginning of a pandemic. And so that birthed the Hunger Relief IE program, where to date we've distributed over 200 tons of food within Riverside and San Bernardino County, thanks to our partners. And now we're geared to double that by the next year with the support that we've rendered and gained. After that, our partnership said, I'm a music and arts organization, so I said, enough with the food. What else do we need to do to keep arts alive in our community? And then that's when I came to my dear friend Jennifer Kane and Patrick Bryant and said, let's create something for the arts. And it birthed Arts for IE. And so now we're focused on bringing in resources and funding to ensure that we know where the dollar is, how we can apply for the money, what we can do to combine our efforts to bring in more money. As you heard from my dear friend Patrick Bryant earlier, the amount of money that we're receiving from Californians for the Arts is very low to what they're giving out throughout all of California. And not Californians for the Arts, but the Arts, Cal Arts Association was very low. And so we're looking to upgrade that and bring that to a better standpoint. And again, I just thank everyone that's been a part of the State of the Arts Summit thus far. It's beautiful. You all have seen and you heard the tremendous stories of the power that the arts have had. And like Julie Baker has mentioned, we are the second responders. And it's time for us to work together and to bring arts and so much more to all of our families and children. I thank you so much, everyone, for your time and for joining us. And at this time, I want to now introduce Michelle Decker, Priya Verdula, Sarah, and Karen Suarez. They'll be coming up after me to bring you a panel that you will not want to miss. Thank you all. And again, my name is Josiah Bruni, the CEO and founder of Music Changing Lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Really delighted to be here. Thank you, Josiah. And to Patrick and Jenny, your boards, and everyone here today who is making this just a wonderful event. And I am feeling so blessed from all of the art that I have received today and feeling really energized by it. I'm going to invite up Priya Vidula, Karen Suarez, see that we're okay. I think we're here. I am next to my favorite Pom who keeps me company on this Zoom. I'm a white woman in my mid-50s. I'm wearing thrift store couture with some handmade earrings from a good friend and an original piece of art that represents a small town in Ohio where I used to go and listen to a lot of music. And so it's a great representation for me. Priya, where are you?
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. I'm currently in Redlands, California. Just excited to be on this panel with all these lovely, lovely people.
Karen?
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to greet you from the city of San Bernardino. And I'm a Latina woman with some fiery blue glasses, wearing a bright flowery yellow blouse that makes me happy because the sun's not shining outside, but it's definitely shining in here.
Sarah, where are you from today?
I'm calling in from downtown Los Angeles, also known as Tongva Land, and I also am excited for this conversation. I love talking about where the civic and art can connect with each other.
Let's get into it, because we've heard a lot today. We've heard the case making, we've heard the passion. Let's break it down a little bit, because all of you have really interesting perspectives. How do we put the arts into the civic narrative and into the civic conversation? Priya, I'm going to start with you on that.
Sure. So I want to first start off by defining a few terms and just a little bit of background about me. I'm a medical student, a public health advocate in the community, and also an artist myself. But let's start off with defining art, right? Art, we often think about it as paintings or a museum or structures, but art is audio and visual mediums. And so when you think about visual art, it can be paintings, murals, sculptures, and tapestries, but it can also be, you know, the little finger painting that you did on a Saturday during a pandemic, or chalk on the sidewalk. And then when we talk about audio, it includes music and spoken word and storytelling. I also want to define civic engagement, because again, when we think about civic engagement, it's often in the context of voting, but it also it refers to the way that citizens can participate in the life of their community to improve conditions for others and to help shape the future of the community. And so, you know, when we think about arts and civic engagement, it's really a tool to allow people to really engage within their community and shape their community. Now, coming from a health background, you know, for me, one of the big things is about when we think about health, it's not just about the body. You know, we often visualize people jogging or weightlifting or staying fit, but the mind is part of the body. And mental health, it's not just, you know, a mental illness, but mental health can encompass anxiety and grief, the lack of self-esteem, and a feeling of not really belonging to the society in which you're born and living. And so as we go through this panel, I'll be excited to talk about the way that we can use art to really give that sense of empowerment, which we know is a very important tool for people to feel a sense of balance and feel a sense of belonging in their community. And it's a mutual benefit, because as your community feels more engaged, they also come up with ways to help provide solutions that a rigid structure can't provide. So we know that art can provide a variety of mediums for people to look at different viewpoints and provide solutions to the community problems that society faces today.
Karen, just building on all of that, and thank you, Priya. I think that the definition of the broad frame that allows us to not stay isolated from the arts and to bring the arts into our civic life is really important. How do we put the arts into the civic narrative engagement from where you sit, really as a community developer and a community builder?
Yeah, I really see arts as something that gets woven into like every intersect of our life, right? So when we talk about, and I want to go back to this, you know, our health system, right? We talk about social determinants of health, right? It includes our education, it includes our healthcare, it includes our neighborhoods, our homes, our built environment. It includes the social and community context and our economic stability. Arts needs to be woven into every single aspect of that, because like you said, you know, it supports our mental health. There's opportunities for us to engage more deeply with our communities and with our families. Art is not a luxury. It is something that is really a fabric of our life, and that helps bring neighbors together, communities together. It helps us celebrate all our cultures. It helps us communicate in ways that we may not be able to communicate, you know, here in this virtual space, or if we're sitting in a room with someone. When we don't have the words, arts allows us to express ourselves in a new medium. And so I think that art is actually a natural a natural element that should always be encouraged and a part of our civic and daily lives.
We're bringing up, we have to center equity in this and voice. Sarah, you've been all sorts of places in your work. Build on this. How are we going to put the arts back into our civic narrative?
Well, for me, I think part of it is also remembering where it wasn't separated. The art, to me, arts at a base level is just communication. And I always think about the civic as a reference. It can be a reference to how we're engaging and in this nation co-producing our government together, but it also, for me, can just be any form of governance. How do we group? How do we make decisions together? How do we feel connected, pursue connection? And all that, to me, just needs communication at a base level. And so I just always think of the arts as a toolbox. Having spent my adult life through the identity of being an artist, I also just think about the actual artists themselves, and where the placement of artists are in any of these conversations in any sector aspect of civic life. And so I just would hope that we could, think about this as actually weaving in instincts that have been there culturally around communication for a very long time, and where we can actually enjoy not just revisiting tradition, but also looking for where we can mix, where hybrids are actually meaningful, because that's one of the coolest parts about culture to me. It's always growing and shifting, even when we might define something as traditional. And so anyway, I look forward to talking about how we can talk about that weave looks like, again, based in just kind of remembering what's there too.
Well, let's start there. Go ahead, Sarah. Let's get to the specifics about how this can look, some examples that you've seen that have been transformative.
So for me, I work as an independent consultant many times as an artist. And one of the things I've found useful about that has been being able to have different sector representation. And by sector, I mean that as economic sector, but I also, again, that can have political and cultural layers to it. So sometimes I might, both in my identity, but also my actions, like lean into something that looks more like what a government staff person would do, or lean into something that might be more what a community developer would do. But all of it is an interest for me, and always focusing on neighborhoods themselves. And neighborhood, I think, is just one term we have to describe place, as each of us kind of psychologically might attach to it around us. And that can literally include neighbors, like who's around us. So in a lot of the projects that I'm working on, it's actually about often stimulating governance groups, but also sometimes it's still finding ones that are there formally and informally, and gathering people and starting processes like how we might, again, make decisions together. So, but the government is always involved. For me, city and county a lot has been a focus, but so in Los Angeles, here I've worked a lot with the County of Los Angeles there's actually, we have an arts and culture department, and inside that's something called a civic art program. And so I've worked on a number of civic art initiatives where I was in a lead artist role, or I also, brought in a lot of other artists and designers, or supported other people to produce. One area of focus has been in South Los Angeles County, using parks and libraries as healthy public spaces that have been used, but really, to me, those spaces themselves can be places of intersection for neighbors. So again, it's a way of investing in civic life, is actually by using one thing the government has to offer, which is these public spaces in the form of parks and libraries, as a place, again, to gather, to enjoy, to connect, but also quite literally, again, having artists from those neighborhoods as well as otherwise in Los Angeles County come to connect and amplify really things neighbors on the ground want to have be important. And that can just be anything. I mean, if you just think about what comprises a neighborhood, it's houses, it's public spaces, it's places where you buy food. I mean, really anything then can become a place that an artwork could happen. But again, just become a place of communication to further amplify interests, around health in that neighborhood.
I'm going to go to Karen next, because I know this really builds on her passions. But as you talk, I'm thinking of the arts community as the liaison, as the conduit through which community expression is translated into policy or action. And vice versa. So great to have that office in LA that you can rely on that is funding some of this work. Karen, you're doing a ton of civic engagement in San Bernardino. You're connected to a lot of organizations, housing in particular, I think of, and the general plan. And how might you see the arts woven into some of that? Are you already seeing it?
Yeah, we've received some support from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and so I'm the director of Uplift San Bernardino through the Making Hope Happen Foundation, and it's a collective impact program that's focused on neighborhood development and economic opportunities and human capital. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is we actually decided that we needed an arts organization to serve as our technical assistance provider and lend their expertise on how to creatively connect with our residents and neighborhoods. So we're going to be doing these really neat artistic projects called Blocks of Care with Arts Connection here in the city of San Bernardino, and allowing our residents to fully self-express in ways that they want, and talk about what it would take to truly care about your neighborhood and about them personally, and what is it that they need from our community partners, what is it that they need from our civic leaders, what are some of the changes that need to happen, that many of our neighborhoods in our community have been ignored and forgotten. And so how do we build the bridge to help support them and their babies, right, and their children, most importantly, and also how do we continue to foster that culture of intentionally caring for each other and to acknowledging each other's humanity. And so we are very excited here in the city of San Bernardino to bring in our art partners to really help inform us of how we can do a better job, one, of infusing the arts, but also of connecting with our fellow neighbors and residents.
That is very cool. I had not known that. Didn't know that one. It's great. Priya, you've got some great examples as well, so please share.
Sure. I was just thinking back to a year ago, before the pandemic and when we were able to travel. Traveling is a very hectic experience for a lot of us who are, packed the last day and scrambling to get to the airport and standing in lines. And I remember in a particular instance, I think this was at the LA airport, and I walked in there, and for some reason, I was feeling so calm for the very first time. And I'm looking around, and it's not the normal setup, of the stringent white and then the colorful patterns of the airline logos. It was greenery and grass, and there was fresh air blowing from different areas. There was mist, and then there was this huge sign that said "Be well." And I'm standing there in line, just I could feel my blood pressure just easing away. My heart rate's going down. And I realized that it was a healthcare company, and I can't quite remember which one it was, but that was the campaign. It was just showing how you could take the most stressful experience and transform it without people even understanding what was happening to them. But we were connecting emotionally. We were connecting through our senses, through sight, through vision, through the music. And so that was just one example that I started thinking about, that we could actually bring into different spaces, kind of as Sarah had said, of what if we put that into a hospital setting or a grocery store or our schools, where it wasn't necessarily about the color, and yet you were using the environment and plants to kind of give that artistic feeling and connecting emotionally. So that was one example. In Brooklyn, they have the Center for Urban Pedagogy, and this is the very important part about when we think about the challenge of engaging the youth. Nowadays, youth really are connected in ways through videos and music, and I'm sure that was back in the day too, but nowadays there's a lot more communication streams to be able to do that. So the Center for Urban Pedagogy in Brooklyn, New York, what they've done is they've used art to engage the community's youth in planning city issues. And so, from things like who would make decisions when trying to, who would make decisions for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So students were asked, instead of to describe, they were asked to draw diagrams of alternatives and how we could ensure that everyone has access to food. So they were making detailed posters using art to do that. And they were engaged. And that actually, the retention rate was amazing because they started connecting with their city officials. They started talking to their neighbors and friends and using the art that they created to show this and to translate this in a way that maybe a city sending out a survey saying, how do you feel about this issue, wouldn't be able to do. And then a final example is when the pandemic hit, we were all kind of under our own virtual house arrest, if you will. And I remember, I don't know if you guys use the Nextdoor app, but I took a walk outside. And on the sidewalk, there were these just children had written like, you can do it, you can do it. The world is not ending. Like you were all in this together, just, you know, pieces of wording on the sidewalk, the sun, you know, drawing the sun on the sidewalk. And I just remember feeling like, wow, my community cares. They're like, even though I can't see it, there are people out there who are caring for each other in whatever way they can through the form of art. And so there's so many ways to integrate art. And I think the most important thing is, you know, again, we often think of art as being presented to you, but we have to create a communal space for people to actually be a part of that art, to be able to communicate by themselves through that art. So many different ways to do that. And again, it's not just about putting sculptures or paintings, but bringing the community in through festivals and art fairs, music. So a lot of different opportunities to be able to do that. And again, the benefits are both ways. It's for the people that the art is servicing, but it's also for the community as a whole to grow.
Priya, everything you're saying is just amazing. We lost Karen because she lost power at her house. So let's get on the infrastructure piece. That's kind of I'm just going to use this as a segue moment as we're talking about these ideas. Karen mentioned Robert Wood Johnson. Sarah, you mentioned, you know, the city of LA. You know, Priya, you mentioned a corporate folk who were doing the piece at the airport. Who can invest in this? How are we going to start asking, given that we're going to have a broad definition? And so much of what you're saying for me is, you know, my example is we used to build cathedrals. Now we build, then we went to building malls, and now we build big warehouses. And you know, I think we watched other countries have these kind of intense shared cultural moments through COVID, and we had some of them, right? I had kids doing the chalk on the sidewalk as well, but then there was also this sort of like, wow, but we're really all very lonely and isolated, right? We weren't able to lean into that. And I think we feel some pressure to come out of this to say, this is going to be different. This is going to be fair. This is going to be more just. It's going to be more beautiful, more peaceful, more exciting. So who's going to pay? What are our opportunities for maybe unusual partners to get into what we're talking about? Because I mean, we are the antidote. You are the antidote. Excuse me. I was raised by artists, so I tend to do this. You are the antidote. So Sarah, you want to jump on that?
Yeah. I just really believe in public funding. I come out of a public art and public space design tradition because I love public spaces. Like I go to my neighborhood parks most days, but I also just literally love public money. And part of what I mean by that is that this idea that you know, we all contribute to the government through taxes in various ways, and appropriately, I would think, to different degrees depending on income and other capacities that we have. But again, to me, it's this idea that there's a reason why we pool our money and how we, you know, make decisions, again, influencing the government bodies that we are connected to talk about what that gets invested in. And I always want to think about how arts can relate to public funding, again, as a layer that can be in any number of other layers, as opposed to a separated out layer of funding. And so right now, I just think there's such a tremendous opportunity, you know, with the American Rescue Plan, you know, has been in the past year. We saw with CARES Act and some of the other relief funding that came through. I will say with all this, you know, I always wanted to, you know, be strategic about how we're using funding or going into debt as a government bodies. But I also think that there's a reason to me why that kind of stimulant money really, again, can be thought of as to artists as well as to arts production. And I also just want to add in to creative thinking that I think we need right now to be able to figure out how to structure our government, structure our neighborhoods, find that health that really would be appropriate and just for all the people in these lands that we're in. And so for me with public money, the other thing is I just always want to think about how public money can partner and what are all those different forms of private partnership that can come in so that it's a mix. And so again, that's not just a reliance on public money. It doesn't even always have to be like the main or the primary, but it's just can be a stabilizer or again, a catalyst to other resources. And so, right now for me, in terms of the income I bring in a given year, it is a mix of government funding and a lot of actually local community foundations, as well as national foundations in various ways. But I also always think about like, what are other kind of private partnerships that could come in more? And that could be from businesses in the area of various scales, small scales to really large scale. And I still think about it again, back to like, as an individual with our dollars, how can any one of us even still like feed into complementing that public money? And because we need to take some risks together to be able to practice what this civic life is, I think that we're just flirting with today. One, again, that's for me based in culture and communication being, effervescing and something we play with in our daily lives.
Sarah, thank you. We're bringing Karen back in. Yay. So lots of infrastructure funding coming down, Karen. We're going to have to get some of that. Look it up. Talking about funding in this moment, I think the idea about artists and the arts as informing governance is are in it, but all three of you were talking about this, and this could be really powerful because a number of governments, local governments, county, are looking at strategic planning processes. They're looking at their general plans. What you've done, Karen, by including artists as your TA providers for that work is so powerful. So there's probably, we've worked for years to say the arts have economic impact, look. But I think there's something to really center on. And the other would be very specific sectors that have been harmed through COVID. And tourism is going to be the big one. Tourism is going to be the one that counties are going to try to spend money on. Infrastructure be another one. I think it's a pretty easy case to say we can come along and we can really do this. We can really enhance this, and connecting the convention and visitor bureau folks and the chamber folks into the arts community for some of these ARP funds might be another play. Priya, I'll go to you next on the funding, and then Karen, I'm going to come back to you. So glad you're back.
Yeah, I think Sarah did a great job of talking about the public and private partnerships. That's definitely something that I think about too. And, when we think about applying for grants from the perspective of people who are trying to get grant funding, also broadening the perspective and understanding the intersectionality of art with all of these other disciplines. So like I said, I'd like to see, more healthcare foundations getting involved in giving grant funding for art. I would like to see environmental organizations or environmental organizations really helping out with funding for the arts. So keeping a very multidisciplinary approach as we do talk about these community partnerships and public and private partnerships for funding.
And organizing, many foundations are funding organizing right at the center. Karen?
Yes, no, I definitely want to echo that sentiment about the collaborate. And we talk, and some of the speakers spoke earlier about, the power of collaboration, but really also organizations who are not art organizations to advocate to include their art partners is something really critical too when you're doing some of these larger grant applications. A lot of foundations, it's invitation only. So, bring your art colleagues along into this invitation that you've received, you know, and you know, writing them in as some grantees, because I think so much about just the power of art. Or like you mentioned the infrastructure pieces, Michelle. Look at Los Angeles Union Station, when they invited artists to submit for their bus shelters and to submit for, you know, even Union Station itself, featuring the artists and featuring their artwork as you're walking through that long, you know, dark hallway into, you know, the rest of Union Station. That was an incredible transformation. And even here in the city of San Bernardino, when the SBX was being built, to find some of the artistic elements for it, I do think there's a lot of opportunity. It's just so powerful to see what art has done for some infrastructure pieces, and you know, more recently, the Enterprise Building in downtown San Bernardino hired some artists to do these beautiful historic murals on the side of their building. It completely changes that alleyway. I think about the umbrellas that were put in the alley in Redlands. Again, so I definitely want to, if there's city leaders or elected officials on here, like, there's so many beautiful ways to support your arts community while investing in the infrastructure that's, you know, direly needed in many of our neighborhoods. So I definitely want to highlight that and really just advocate for continued collaboration. If there's any bankers, you know, as a former, you know, community development officer for a bank, like, I want to advocate to my colleagues as well to consider that intersection between community development and the arts. You know, building homes that have some sort of, you know, art element to it is going to bring a different type of community environment for those residential areas that are being built. You know, or if you're starting a small business, you know, how do we bring in our arts community to support, you know, the facade improvements for a business that's brick and mortar, or even, you know, with our local chambers of commerce, encouraging to continue to bring arts to the table by increasing the celebratory opportunities, right, through music and cultural celebrations of the small business owners that come to our communities. So I definitely think there's a lot of opportunities as far as funding goes, and not just funding art in a silo, right, through like the National Endowment of Arts, but how do you find that intersect between health and human services and the arts, and HUD and the arts? If, you know, getting at our federal level for them to get creative about how they can collaborate and do something really powerful for communities.
I think we're doing it today because we're building power and we're building voice. And I don't think the arts are going to go away in the Inland Empire. They're only going to get louder, and that's really exciting. I'm going to close with a final bonus question for everyone. What's your ask? You know, blank canvas, magical, you know, wand. What would you like to ask for your community? Financial, anything? Priya?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's for them to see the importance in art, I think, more than anything else, the importance that art can really help progress society, and that it is a vital piece, just like providing other services is. And so once we need to get to that mindset where we believe that, where it's part of the policy making that we do, where people, you know, when you think about health, when you think about infrastructure, you think about art as well. And so it's understanding that art is such an integral part of society. It's not just, you know, again, I've been saying this over and over again, but it's not just the paintings. It's not a luxury. It is a right. It's a responsibility of the government to provide for the people, to create a space for the people, and just to continue that understanding as you move forward. And I think Karen did a great job of talking about including art in all of the policies when it comes to housing, when it comes to public parks. So just really keeping that in mind throughout, that art is just as important and just as important as every other component of society, if not, I would argue more, because of all of the expanded benefits that it can provide.
Sarah?
My wish for the Inland Empire is that that small exploratory groups form right now. So whatever the government body is you associate to, a town, a city, the county itself, I just think there's a tremendous opportunity right now to put a cross-sector group. So again, get government staff and or politician, community development leader, nonprofit, could be for-profit real estate developer, could be, again, other kinds of nonprofit and for-profit leadership that somehow represent the range of what you think of for your place. And artists. There are artists in every neighborhood, or again, every government jurisdiction we can think of in these lands. Make small groups and really explore, what do you think could, what can you bring together? For me right now, it's very literally because there's going to be opportunities to apply for relief dollars this year, and those kind of team-based groups, again, where the local government bodies involved, will make for very competitive applications. And I just will add on that I just really want to encourage artists or other kinds of arts leaders to think broadly about what you're making and to look at where there's an intersection between that and something else that exists in the world. So I just think we can do things, again, from our arts perspectives to reach out. I think Priya and Karen and Michelle, you're all wonderful examples from your other sector representations too, about how you can meet us. And I just think it's having an open mind, again, about what we each make.
Karen.
I think my ask would be to just dive in, and I think part of hesitations of cross collaboration is when we don't understand a sector, or we don't we have these fears that we don't know enough. Like, we don't have to be experts in everything, but you are an expert in your craft, and you are valuable, and your personal experience and your artistic expression is important for our communities. And so I want to challenge everyone to just dive in and collaborate with, the most non-traditional partner you could possibly think of, or anyone that you're like, I don't think I could work with that sector. Believe me, I think arts is one of those things that it just builds the bridges. It just builds bridges and builds community. And I think that would be my magic one, that everyone would partner with each other in sectors that you are unfamiliar with.
You guys are all amazing. This has been an absolute pleasure. And I just want to say on behalf of the Inland Empire Community Foundation, for me, that donors in the Inland Empire and outside of the Inland Empire who understand us really start to give individually at higher and higher levels. And a strong community foundation, California Community Foundation, love them. They're like 400 million. We're like 120 million. And it's not a lot of discretionary funds. We do our best, and we will continue to show up for the arts. But I think understanding how community foundations can work, because there's so many philanthropic tools that are not your individual gift, right? You want that $100 to go to that arts organization you love. But when someone is ready to pass on a house, or pass on an arts collection, or give one of their life insurance policies, there are tools that we can use to help with that. And so all of these have to be working together. You guys are great. Thank you so much for this privilege. Thank you to Arts Connection and Riverside Arts. Really appreciate it. And I am handing it back to Josiah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle Decker, Karen, Priya, and Sarah. That was a beautiful presentation. And I think making Karen's dream true right now, as we are all collaborating in an organic way to keep the arts alive. So I thank you all for participating. Coming up next, now we have a beautiful presentation from our very own, the Hugh family. The father, Shane Hugh, is an experienced violinist. He graduated from USC, go Trojans, back in 2014, having performed alongside many worldwide famous musicians such as Oscar-winning composer of music Tan Don, top pianist Ling Lang. He also received top prizes from various music competitions that he's participated in. And his wife, Jane Fang, is an experienced violinist. She's been a violinist and a teacher for the past 20 years. She was also in the Shenzhen Symphony Orchestra for 12 years and has performed with many worldwide famous musicians such as violinist Midori Goro, famous tenor singer Jose Carreras, And also State of the Arts Summit is honored to have their daughter, Annie Hugh, I believe, joining them as well. Annie's only 10 years old. She was a student of ours. She's been with us for now 2 years. She's performed and opened up for the Oscar pre-parties and so much more. And you guys are in for a delightful show. Thank you all for joining us. And again, keep arts alive in the Inland Empire. See you later.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Romaine Washington, and I am going to be zooming in on education equity. I am an African American woman, and I have, if we could progress that a little bit, and I have glasses on, and I have a shoulder length, almost hair, and a green top on. And if we could move the slide forward. I am a poet as well as an educator. I've been an educator for over 20 years in the public school system. I have 2 chapbooks, Sirens in Her Belly and Purgatory Has an Address was most recently released. What you're looking at is a little bit of the Bitmoji room that I created for my students this year as we were learning long distance with books. And a little congratulations to Joseph Opp, who won 6th in the state for Poetry Out Loud. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. If we can move the slide forward. And so I'm also a member of Women Who Submit. Only 20 to 25% of authors are women. And this is Women Who Submit is a group of women, and not just women, but those in the LGBTQ community, to encourage us to write and to submit and to get out and promote. And so what you're looking at the top picture is a group of us gathering pre-pandemic. And then what you're looking at the bottom is a group of us on Zoom. And we've been meeting every Saturday to make sure we stay connected and that we continue to encourage each other and do wellness checks on each other. And I have come to grow and feel like I know these ladies because I can see their faces. And so I can see their facial expressions as we talk. Can we move forward a little bit? And this is what my Zoom class looks like almost every single day, where no faces are visible. They say it helps reduce Zoom fatigue. Unfortunately, it decreases bonding and classroom culture. A lot of times when I check for understanding, I can see facial expressions and know whether I need to repeat something or stay a little bit longer or give further explanation. And it's really, I can't do that when Zoom looks like this. I can sit in on 504s and IEPs, but I have very little to add because I don't get to know the students as well as that connection that we form in WWS. Next slide, please. And so I want to talk a little bit about disconnection when we talk about social justice and technology. And it was really highlighted during the pandemic. In San Bernardino County Unified School District, we have approximately 407,268 students enrolled in schools. And about 291,402 students are on free or reduced lunch. When we look overall at California, we have about 20% of all California students who cannot get on the internet at home. And a lot of that has to do with that free and reduced lunch and where families need to allocate funds to be able to survive and thrive. And so what happened with the pandemic is it really highlighted that digital divide that you've probably heard about. Next slide, please. And so when we talk about the digital divide, this is LAUSD. And what they did was they invested $100 million to provide laptops for students. In a lot of areas, that's what happened. Schools stepped up and they provided laptops. A lot of people partnered with Verizon or their local internet service, and they were kind enough to extend free service to students so that they wouldn't miss out academically, so that they can continue to grow. But the question is, before the pandemic, how were those students doing homework, typing papers, getting help with online tutoring? And so a lot of times I would get assignments with lowercase i's, which indicated that they were doing their homework on their phones. And they didn't have the connectivity and they didn't have the devices that they needed. And it really became highlighted during the pandemic. If I could get the next slide, please. And so the other thing that really became a challenge, and I'm talking about areas of disconnect, one with the emotional disconnect when we can't look at the students in Zoom, and we needed some kind of navigation there that we didn't quite get. The second disconnect was just accessibility with technology and internet and broadband width. And the third area of disconnection is frequency of classes being held. And so if you look at the slide, the pink every day, more than 2 hours, students got to meet. And if you look at the bottom, that bar is really long. That bar is students who, we're going backwards. There we go. That bar is students whose families were at the top end of being able to bring home a good income, their parents bringing home a good income, them being professional in professional fields where they brought in a solid income. And in the top tier is where you see people that made under $25,000 a year. And so having education or access to education every day, just for 2 hours or more than 2 hours, you see that that wasn't available at the very top end. Every day for 2 hours or less, you start to see some things equal out. And then a few times a week, again, there seems to be some equality there, and it's not good. That's not a good thing. There's some evenness in the lack, and that shows a disconnect as well. If you look at the other bar on the right-hand side, what you see is the 5 is people that felt that what they were getting was good. And it's almost even all the way across. And that probably had to do with a lot of outreach. Lunches were provided for students that got free lunch or got help. They had drive-throughs where students could still pick up their food. They had a lot of people that picked up hubs. I think they're called hubs, hotspots. They're called hotspots. And so a lot of people stepped in to make sure during the pandemic to make sure those things were available. The ones are where people were not satisfied. And the ones down at the bottom you see are really not that many, because they got all of the things they needed for the most part, while the ones at the top making less than $25,000 a year, you see that band is higher. If we could go on to the next slide. So again, that's the disconnect, even with help from the government and help from schools and help from corporations, there was a disconnect. However, here's some of the good things. I don't want to just highlight the bad things as an educator that a lot of people saw. And that was that there were students that actually thrived during this time period. There were students that felt a sense of relief in long distance learning. And those students were Black, many of them Black and Asian American, who found a little bit of respite in not being in a hectic situation where they had to deal with microaggressions and outward aggressions. And they found they were in a safe space when they were distance learning. And so that, while they were thriving, indicates another area of disconnect outside of pandemic. When those students are in school, why is it that they feel safer long distance learning? And so we have a ways to go in making safe places for students outside of the pandemic, as well as providing technology, consistent technology and connections for students. Shy kids, hyperactive kids, highly creative kids, kids on the margins also found a sense of comfort in long distance learning. And again, it has to do with not having to be constrained in a certain mold. And so that's something else for us to consider as we're coming out of the pandemic. Next slide, please. Here's something else that was a positive during this pandemic time, and that is, and I was an advisor for Poetry Out Loud, as I talked about earlier. And one of the beautiful things about that, it was the scheduling of practice, where we didn't have to worry about being picked up, someone picking the students up, and also just the time constraints as well as the distance constraints that we would usually feel. Sometimes we had practice at 7 p.m. We'd hop on Zoom and practice. Science Olympiad was all on a platform, a social media platform, making it possible for students around the country to compete in science-based fields. And the National Speech and Debate Association also, as it says national, the forensics teams, when they meet, they compete in states. And my son was in that, and I had to scramble to come up with money so that he could fly to the state where they were holding competitions. And so it became an equalizer. Those enrichment opportunities for the arts that normally having money to travel and having time to rehearse became something that wasn't a barrier. So there were some gives and takes. There were some pluses that we can look at as we move out of the pandemic. And if I can get the next slide, please. So as we look at hybrid, oftentimes we think of hybrid as just a matter of while we're in person, we're also going to be online, but there are many ways that we can use technology to help students thrive and to help bridge gaps and to help have a sense of equity. And so we're going to be looking at how we can provide opportunities and those the technology and the connectivity for all students. Who's going to step up and fill that gap? How are we going to make that possible? How are we going to nurture that? And we're going to look at how we can create safe spaces online and in person and help bridge the digital divide. So students, once we get back together, students who were able to borrow Chromebooks and laptops are still going to have that opportunity. And so those are some of that journey in social justice and equity as an educator that I have experienced over the year, and my students have experienced, some good, some not good, some shone the light on areas we need to grow in. And I want to thank you. And I think we have another aspect of looking at connectivity coming up with Kate.
Thank you, Romaine. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Zankwitz, and I am the Family Programs and Community Engagement Manager at the Huntington. I'm just going to start by verbally describing myself. I'm a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair parted to the side. I have a long oval face, and right now it's dominated by a huge smile because I'm so grateful to be here and to be part of this community today. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm dressed in hunter green, forest green, and I'm here today to talk about my work on inclusion in museums. I've been in museums for almost 20 years, and my focus has been on creating inclusive museum-based experiences with communities. I'm a lot of things to a lot of people, but for the purposes of this conference, I'm going to start by saying I'm a person who has cerebral palsy, or CP. I'm also an arts educator, a person who loves museums and art experiences and galleries. And today I'm not claiming to speak for anyone else who has CP, because people who have CP are not a monolithic group and we don't have all the same experiences. My experience of living in my body is unique to me. When you've met one person with CP, you've met one person with CP. I have never not had CP, so my experience of disability is not one of loss, and it's part of who I am, and I can't imagine myself without it. There would be no me as the me in front of you today if I had not been, quote unquote, born that way, and I'm making air quotes with my fingers. So I'm starting my talk in this way to center the perspective of an arts professional who has a disability. Too often, we frame our conversations about accessibility as how we can serve audiences with disabilities. And we actually are missing a crucial inclusion piece, which is hiring artists, curators, performers, and educators who identify as disabled. I want to make sure that when we're talking about virtual access today, we aren't assuming that people with disabilities are only in the audience. We're not just an audience with needs. We're not just consumers of cultural programming, and we aren't the passive beneficiaries of programming as we're often portrayed to be. I want to make sure that we're broadening our notion of what inclusion could look like, meaning people with disabilities are calling the shots, have been empowered within cultural institutions, and are actively creating programming too. I'd like to call this anti-ableist arts programming. And when I say anti-ableist arts programming, what I'm really talking about is, well, ableism being a set of practices or beliefs that discriminates against disability, and anti-ableism being the active challenging and acting against that system of discrimination. So the focus of my talk today is to explore what we've learned in this last year, which has actually presented us with an enormous arts engagement opportunity. This is nothing less than a historical moment. Using the push to put all of our arts programming online, and actually earlier this morning, we heard about how half of the arts organizations surveyed in the annual report did that pivot to the online universe. Using that push to put all of our arts programming online now means that arts institutions never have to go back to quote unquote normal again. I don't want to go back. I'm one of those people who has just been so excited about the gains we've gained in the last 365 days. Arts institutions can now seize the moment to build inclusive, anti-ableist art programs as part of their everyday operations. So let's take this moment to ensure that arts access remains at the heart of our missions, even as we transition to reduced capacity opening. So I want to reel back for just a second and drill down and explore what we're talking about when we talk about access. What do we mean by that word? On a basic level, we could mean physical or economic access, being able to reach something that's easy to get to. Access can also imply something that's easy to understand. Content is clear and easy to understand. It's often called accessible. For my purposes today, I'm also talking about those things and virtual accessibility, which is, being able to access content from a device that's connected to the internet. And I'm so grateful, Romaine, for your talk, because it really laid bare the digital divide that is in California. And so when we have these conversations around virtual access, we need to be mindful that there's barriers for participation there, and that's not everyone's lived experience right now. On a museum level, what I'm seeing is that we've been able to provide a lot more arts programming virtually because the economic and physical barrier of transportation and admission fees has been erased. I mean, that's a huge game changer. This is unprecedented time. And I want to just also focus on the fact that people with disabilities have been asking for at-home arts programming forever. It took a worldwide pandemic to make it so. And I'm echoing the words of Alice Wong and countless other disability activists here. Once being at home became everyone's reality, we had the force we needed as a society to make virtual offerings a matter of course. So the experience of COVID, the experience of not being able to leave the house without great effort, which I just want to remind everyone, that's just a little taste of a disabled person's daily reality. That's a little taste of what it's like to have a disability and experience the world as a disabled person. Once that became everyone's reality, we got the push we needed to make that virtual turn. The physical reality of being able to enjoy programming at home in and of itself is a victory for our community. For people who can't travel, either short or long distances, or wait in line, or sit through a performance, or count on getting home after a performance with accessible transit, the world of arts programming has completely opened up. I hope that we remember these teachings forever. I hope that we never return to the time when we didn't stream talks and classes and arts performances online. I want to take this moment to make our accessible arts programming permanent features part of our general practice for every event. I hope that we show up for people in this way. and that these are not considered temporary accommodations. I want a world where access needs never have to be requested by someone with a disability again. I'm going to say that again just so that I make sure it goes deep. I want a world where access needs never get requested by someone with a disability again. And that means we all have to do it. We all have to make those requests. We all have to show up for each other. Because the truth is, all of these so-called accommodations actually make everything more accessible to everyone. And I love the example of the flattened curb off the street. You know, the design of a curb can help people in wheelchairs, but it can also help people who have strollers or suitcases or carrying heavy things. And that's a really great analogy for how virtual access ends up making things more accessible for everyone. So today, when I'm talking about communications access online, I'm thinking through specifically captions, American Sign Language interpretation, and audio description, sometimes also called verbal description. Because these fundamental communications features are not just benefiting the 1 in 4 Americans who currently experience a disability. And I'm saying currently experience a disability because I want to recognize that this is a really fluid identity. If you're lucky enough to live long enough, you will experience a disability too. The idea of disabled and non-disabled is actually a false opposition. We are all going to be disabled at some point in our lives. So communications access is not just benefiting the 1 in 4 Americans who currently identify as disabled. It's benefiting those who currently identify as non-disabled too. We know that captions can be streamed in multiple languages, and providing language access is an access victory. We know that captions are really great for ESL learners. We know that it helps everyone understand what's going on, from people who learn better by reading text. We know that actually for all learners, it helps people retain information longer. And for audio description or verbal description, which is the narration or description of events, it helps all kinds of folks. It can help blind and partially sighted folks, but if you're doing things with your kids and making dinner, audio description can also help you if you can't keep looking at what's going on. We know that audio verbal description helps people in the autistic community and people with cognitive differences. And according to one study by Vocalize in the UK, verbally described art experiences in museums were more remembered and more meaningful to all visitors who experienced them. So to summarize all of this, access accommodations are not niche. They make the arts more accessible and meaningful for everyone. So this is kind of a historical moment, and it's a time for us to think intentionally about what we want in our virtual programming space. What I'm actually seeing in a lot of art experiences at home is that the performances and what's being offered are actually being taken to a new level. They're not just recorded versions of an experience in a theater. A lot of cultural institutions are raising the bar on their programming, recording behind-the-scenes experiences, pre-performance tours with actors, show and tells with curators and educators. We've got theaters offering readings of theater performances and an intimacy with performers that would not have been possible before, even with the most expensive seats. And I do have to mention that lectures and performances themselves are way more inclusive because you can eat, drink, lie down, turn your camera off, and those are actually equity victories in the disability community too. So to circle back, the opportunity to engage in arts programming remotely is an extremely positive development for people with disabilities or disabled people. I use both terms interchangeably throughout this talk and in my work. People with disabilities face some of the highest unemployment rates in the country because of ableism in the workplace. According to the Bureau of Labor, just only 18% of people with disabilities were employed in 2020. 18% of people with disabilities were employed in 2020. I had to say that twice because that number to me is staggering. People with disabilities who work in the arts also face the same ableism. We've been calling for flexible hours and work from home structures for years. And again, it took a pandemic to make it so. So I'm hopeful about the League of Museum Educators and museum professionals with disabilities who will apply to museums now because of the virtual turn. There'll be more arts employment equity, if some of our work does not depend on the ability to drive to a cultural institution or stand for long periods of time or lift up to 25 pounds or, you know, insert bullet point here that keeps people who are disabled out of the job market, because now we can do the job without those things. I want to pull back for a second and try to distill everything we've learned over the past year on our screens down to a few teachings that we can all kind of take away for today. My first teaching, and I am totally guilty of this myself, don't make assumptions about what someone or what a particular community needs. Take time to get to know people with disabilities in your community. Ask more than one person and don't stop at one person's viewpoint and assume that they, quote unquote, represent, I'm using air quotes, all people with disabilities. That's really important. At the beginning of the pandemic, I made an assumption that we wouldn't be able to do elder programming because I was like, oh, that learning curve with technology, that's going to be too hard. And I was so wrong. So don't make assumptions about what communities are interested in. Build relationships with disabled folks so that people know that your commitment means more than being able to check that accessibility box. We live in this fabulous age where there's so many incredible resources online, and you should take advantage of the online resources out there. There's just so much. And I hope in the chat, if we can just drop in the chat, the one that from Arts Connection that was developed for the conference. Can everyone see that in the chat? I hope they can. Excellent. So there's one in the chat to start you off. Carolyn Lazard's Accessibility in the Arts, Promise and a Practice is also a great place to start. Access doesn't need to be expensive. That's another teaching. I hear this over and over and over again. A lot of institutions tell me they don't have the money to do the work and develop it as part of their everyday practice. But that excuse no longer holds when we have so many different affordable providers of captions and so on. A lot of smaller institutions have consistently told me that they just don't have the funds to contract ASL or American Sign Language interpreters. And I understand that, and that's a really important access provision to have because it symbolizes that you're honoring deaf culture and deaf language and you're showing that commitment. So there's a few ways to deal with this. Maybe you can't afford it for every event, but you can prioritize certain events throughout the year consistently and make sure you promote them within deaf communities so they know about it. Another strategy that's really great, and I've used this at a museum I used to work for, is we actually partnered all of our ASL tours and all of our ASL programming. We partnered up with a local college that was just down the road that offered an ASL interpretation course. So all of our programming was part of student practicum hours, and that was a really wonderful win-win for everyone. You can make this part of your fundraising and ask your non-ASL speaking audience to show up for ASL interpretation through donations. The fourth teaching I have is that when you're doing online virtual events that are accessible, be mindful of your ASL interpreter or captioner, if you're using a human captioner, of their needs. Have more than one interpreter if you have a long event. After half an hour, they get tired. Prep them about the language used, give them a script in advance so that everyone knows how to spell everyone's name out. Give them a copy of the land acknowledgement. This is all very useful for the captioner too if you have a human captioner. Teaching number 5 is to train your staff to gain the access skills they need. And that's never been easier too. In the case of verbal description, which is the narration for blind and partially sighted people, it's usually delivered via headset during physical events. It's very easily implemented online. There is free audio description workshops offered through adlabpro.edu. And there's actually, and that's also in the chat that was put down below. So you can actually find ways to train yourself online to become really, really proficient with these access skills. If you have Fancy Zoom, what I call Fancy Zoom, so that's business, education, or enterprise account, you can do verbal descriptions, audio descriptions, as well as live translations over top of multiple soundtracks with a live interpretation function. And it's a little ball, it looks like a little globe at the bottom of your screen. It takes 3 days in Zoom to activate, and it doesn't work for breakout rooms, but it's a way to provide audio description for a performance. I do want to mention that if you have the money to hire a human for captioning, you really should. CART captioning is real-time speech to text transcription. And humans never make the mistakes that AI makes, artificial intelligence makes. Most of the captioning you find online now, which is very ubiquitous, is AI or artificial intelligence generated. These captions benefit hard of hearing folks, textual learners, as we've said. And if you don't have money to hire a human and AI is your only option, please use it. There will be mistakes, but it's only less than $100 a month to have some of these services. And Zoom also offers AI captioning as well. You can also assign someone in your staff to take that on and make that a regular part of your workflow. My 7th teaching is to practice good Zoom access housekeeping. Take the time to make sure you let people know how to pin ASL interpreters, how to communicate in a text-based or non-text-based way with the hand raise function. If you have people who are using screen readers in the audience, make sure you let people know not to overuse the chat, because blind or partially sighted people using screen readers don't have the choice of not hearing those chats constantly. And I think the big teaching there is just take your time. You don't have to rush. Take time to explain how the captions work. Take time to read out and vocalize the chat, because not everyone can take that text in. Take the time so that people can process and don't feel left out. And make sure you're proud of what you're putting out there, because it lives forever. And that's sort of the final teaching. You've now created access resources that live forever and actually are accessible globally, which is really, really exciting. I want to mention that I often hear from arts organizations that, we don't do this stuff because people with disabilities aren't coming. And I think that's a really interesting notion. First, because many disabilities are invisible, so I would say we are already in the room, whether you know it or not. Sometimes they'll ask, can you make them come? Can you make people with disabilities come? We did X and X, and we still didn't get anyone with disabilities who participated. And I would say, if you do the work as part of your daily and not as a one-off special event, and you promote within disabled communities and build relationships with communities, people will show up and they will tell all of their friends. Sometimes people show up and they don't have a good experience. And that's something I feel like I need to talk about, because oftentimes you may not even know that happened. What I've been hearing from people is that if they don't feel included, they just leave the program. They press that big red leave meeting button and they're out, and they won't come back. There's not much incentive to stay if it isn't inclusive and people feel left out. And that circulates within communities too. Something else I'd like to mention, because it's sort of hovering in the background. As I speak these words, access staff people have been furloughed from major arts institutions across the country. I have to tell you, nothing is a bigger slap in the face to the disability community than when the lone person you can connect with is furloughed. It's a clear message about who the institution values. And so if you have access staff and you can, please keep them on, because they are not expendable and they symbolize your commitment to ensuring inclusive arts programming for everyone. So I want to conclude by saying that the arts have nurtured us through a very tough time. And at the same time, we're coming into this new moment, this exciting time to be an arts programmer where we have all of these virtual options at our fingertips. This is your opportunity as arts professionals to expand your reach to new communities and show that you value disabled folks. Your videos of your art experiences can now be access resources, and it's very affordable to do so. I'd like to leave you with a call to action that goes beyond accessibility accommodations and gets us closer to what I started by calling an anti-ableist arts practice. And that means financially supporting the beautiful and brilliant artists, curators, and performers who identify as disabled. Feed the art you want to see. You can play an active role in sharing disability arts and culture by ensuring that you hire artists and performers with disabilities, as well as behind-the-scenes staff with disabilities. So what gains have we made in arts accessibility, and what teachings have we learned about building inclusive and meaningful art experiences online? We've learned that it's never been easier and that we can and must show up for each other. In the words of Leah Lakshmi Piepsa Samarancina, who wrote a fantastic book called Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice, quote, "When we reach for each other and make the most access possible, it is a radical act of love. When access is centralized at the beginning dream of every action or event, that is a radical act of love. May our virtual arts programming be accessible. May we keep creating radical acts of love in everyone in our community. And that means everyone. Thank you."
And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next segment, the dance performance BFH, choreographed by Crystal R. Edwards, performed by dancers Aisha Badge and Chavner Stalker.
Hey.
Hello, and thank you for that beautiful performance. I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Adrienne Yannick, and I am a woman in her mid-50s with Slavic origins. I'm a white woman. I have a shaved head, and I'm sitting in front of a background that's a burst of sun.
Good morning. My name is Nora Hernandez Melo, and I am a Mexican woman. I'm wearing red lipstick, wearing a beautiful white huipil, which is a traditional Mexican dress with embroidered birds, and I have a rainbow hand-woven headband on my head. And I am honored to be here. I am in my 30s, and so pleasure, just ready to share beautiful vibrations. I'm surrounded by 10 quartz singing bowls, and I'll be playing these later.
Thank you, Nalani. It's so nice to see you. We're really happy to be in this conversation. I'll just mention that I'm also grateful and honored that I have the opportunity to be sitting on Cahuilla, Serrano, and Chemehueve and Western Shoshone land. I am right outside Joshua Tree National Park here in the high desert. And we were asked to be in conversation today about the topic of climate justice in the arts. And we're really going to speak sort of to each other in a conversation. So if you can bring Nalani back up, that would be great. We're going to talk a little bit about our practices. And then we're going to have a real treat at the end where Nalani's offering a sound bath to all of us. And so I just wanted to first, I'll just say a little bit about my own practice. I'm an artist. I'm also an educator, and I also serve as an end-of-life doula. And recently I've been really working to integrate all of those roles. And my practice actually right now is centered around performance, and really the work is centered around the ecologies of the desert and really understanding what it means to be alive at this time with all these transitions that many people have mentioned that are going on, and how I as an artist can be really part of moving through and assisting with those transitions. In specific, in relationship to the climate, what I would say is that I'm sure, I imagine everyone here really understands that we're undergoing significant changes in our climate. We certainly feel it here in California around the fire, around our droughts, one of which we're currently in. Many ways that we and our loved ones that live all over are affected and have been and continue to be and will be continued to be affected by climate-driven, human-driven climate disruption. And so, but this, of course, this change that we need to make, it intersects with so many other changes. And so what we are thinking about is how to make a just transition. So how to not just do the transition on the other end of horrible things happening and being in reactive mode, but understanding what's being asked of us and the kind of transitions to move from limited finite natural resources into a kind of regenerative thinking, understanding what resource we have that really is unlimited and infinite, like the sun, like our ability to create community, like our ability to spark creativity. And so, Nalani, did you want to say anything else at this point, in this beginning point, about how you think of climate justice in the arts?
Yes, so for those who don't know me, I have been performing sound baths. I am also a curandera, which is a Mexican folk healer, and have been a visual artist for the entirety of my life. But most recently, for the last, I would say the last 5 years, I've been dedicating myself to providing these almost somatic therapeutic experiences through singing bowls and chanting. And the way for me that it's been relating to the climate and justice and climate change altogether, my work, my spiritual work, and my performance work with the singing bowls, I am calling in the elements. I am working with vibrations or energy and activating. So as we've transitioned into this new new era, new shift where we're starting to feel those immediate changes of our climate around us, and then also the pandemic, which also created an immense change within our own climates and our own ecosystems. My work became more activated in really leaning into this somatic therapy of a way to activate oneself to connect to what we have around us. And it's almost like a quiet but powerful activism act, in the sense of when people come to me, they're coming mostly just with the intention of, I want to relax, I want to experience this beautiful meditation and such. But for me, there's this underlined purpose and also just magic, I call it. But we are activating, we are resonating with vibrations, we are getting in tune with our body. And for me, it's become this underlying, this personal purpose of, by doing that, I am also inspiring and sparking these individuals to walk back out into the world, into their environments, and open their perspectives and be more in tune and notice this heightened sensitivity that one can experience after doing sound therapy, to light, to sound, to earth, to their environment, and hence start to think a bit more about what is happening to the world that I occupy, this space I occupy. So I'm very honored that Adrian invited me to come and have this beautiful discourse.
Thank you, Nilani. And that's so important, that we understand that we're not separate from nature, that we are nature. And so we understand the ways that actually we treat each other is completely connected to how we treat the earth. And we see that there's, a real need for some shifts in that regard. And I really start with myself around all of this. How am I treating the other people around me? How am I, treating the land that exists around me? How am I treating the animals that are around me? How am I thinking through, even beyond my own self, my own life, to other generations, about thinking about the impact that, what I'm doing right now is having. I'll just say a few things about some ways that my own practice has shifted, and two projects I'll just mention very briefly. And what I want to say is that there's this acknowledgement now that for many people, for quite a while, it was understood that like maybe the artists would help with waking people up to the realities of what's going on, and that we'd be, part of, bringing awareness to the issues. Well, there's this greater understanding now that we're beyond that state, that people have awareness. We're in a post-woke state around climate change. And that really what's needed now is something different, which has to do more with how do we connect, how do we live within nature alongside, our sisters and brothers of the plants and the animals and each other. Again, how do we understand how to really live with each other? How do we heal? How do we attend to our feelings? How do we research and experiment to understanding the ways to make change? So these are some things that are being called to us as artists to think about. How do we assist, these changes and help usher them in? And in my own work, I've been doing work that I never would have imagined that I would do. One of my practices is that I read people's climate futures with an eco-tarot deck that I made. So I sit out in public and people I offer eco-tarot readings. And I've been doing this in the pandemic. They moved online, but I've done more than 1,000 readings. And these readings are really channeling IPCC reports, channeling the climate data, but combining that with ecological values, and really is part of understanding how to assist people and ushering them wherever they are in whatever they think that they need to be doing in their life to join with others in this great turning that we see that's happening. Another project that I've done is a speculative performance project called Dry Lab 2023, where I directed and worked with 8 women that went out 60 miles away from running water and lived for 30 days on a very small amount of water a day. Some of it was portioned to them, some of it was portioned to a communal source
that they then had to negotiate with each other how to use. And they had 4 gallons of water a day for everything, for cooking, cleaning, toilet, everything, eating, etc. And also we're living with the water-wise diet. And there's so much to say about that project. It also is certainly, there's other people that, live this way, but most commonly we live with using 80 to 100 gallons of water a day in our often common mindless culture around using of that precious resource, and especially up here in the high desert where we are using our aquifer every time we flush the toilet. So this was important for us to understand, how can we do this? How do we do it? What do we need to do it? And one of the lessons I'll just share with you is that at the end of the 30 days, the participants were not depleted. They actually wanted to remain. And that was partly because of this incredible creation of community, and also the heightened sense of beauty and sacredness around being mindful of every drop of water. Bringing sacredness to that actually heightened their life experience to the extent that they actually wanted to stay and continue in this way. And so I just wanted to talk about that as the real incredible power of art, of beauty, of the community, of being connected to the earth, to more than fill in the gaps of what we think we might have to lose or what we might have to give up. Nalani, did you have anything to share more about your practice, things you've noticed?
Yes, one of the things that we initially had discussed was just how our practice had shifted during the pandemic or after the pandemic. In the midst of being an artist and a curandera, but also just a community representative and giver. When the pandemic arrived immediately, and I saw this with many of us, going out there virtually and giving as much as we can. I started trying to do almost daily sound baths on Instagram or on Zoom, and just opportunities to give back to others as the stress was kind of starting to pile on with the shift in our environments, our shift in our everyday. And I hit a wall. I hit a wall of personal depletion. And I think we have all hit many, not just one, but multiple walls during this whole year of I've been giving so much to survive or to help others survive. And you're hit with this moment, this forced moment of reflection and asking this deeper question. And it was a question that Adrian posed to me when we started talking, was just, how do we continue this work? And what is the actual purpose of it? You know, how has it changed? Is it no longer about you, or is it about others? And it got me thinking that especially in the service of being of service, in spiritual work, if I'm not nurturing myself, if I'm not taking care of my ecosystem, my body, I am of no service to others. And that is also, I think, one of the biggest thoughts or questions that we all face, that if we take everything else away and we force you to stay in this one box, which happened to us with quarantine isolation, it really makes me wonder, what do I have to give back once I go back into that world? Who am I truly, and what can I do to really now shed what is no longer of service and prepare ourselves to be mindful of coming out into this earth and this planet? I think all of us realize we are sharing space, we are sharing energy. We all live on one earth, and it's something we take for granted. It's absolutely gone, that we can't see anybody else. And in that essence, kind of similar to Adrian's project, after going through this immense stress and this almost hermit card of being, being left in my something that had become a sacred space, now it was a true test of, is this still my sacred space if I'm forced to only remain here? And I spent most of the year in the desert, in my home in Desert Hot Springs. And it allowed me to return to my practice first for myself, recognize what it is that I'm doing here that connects me to my body, and then the extension of the desert, the land. This work for me didn't really ignite or spark or feel rooted until I was in the desert, where I was able to feel the vibrations and the vortex of just working with this sacred land beyond me, and now using my voice to call in more energy. But after, as we're transitioning now into this opening and kind of the project is done, we can reemerge, it has really made me wonder how to step into the world now, being mindful of, at any moment this could be taken from me, and what do I want to give if at any moment it could just, my capability of giving can be taken away. And similar to the participants who now, they actually almost like a heightened appreciation for life or for existence and your environment. You almost wonder, what was before really, was that really worth it, or was that presence, or this is actually more authentic to me now. And so with that, I just now my practice has just become more of, I want to be that spark, even if it's unknown, or if it's just my own personal intention. I hope, and I set the intention for myself, that when I'm leading these meditations or these projects and these sound baths, that each individual is allowing themselves to just return to simplicity, just the essentials, just the bare basics of, this is my body, what do I feel, and what is happening here. Because once we all lost, I think we all realized how not in tune we were with ourselves until we were forced to be just with ourselves for so long. And Adrian, if you have anything to bounce off of or echo from this, please let me know. But it's just, I just had not realized how much the work had just become work, do it, keep producing or keep performing. And until I hit that wall, it brought me back to, let's just strip everything away. Everything else has already been taken away, so let's just return to this moment. And what does this mean to me? And just the last thing I want to say with the post-woke, in my work, I've been following how, spirituality or holistic living has been almost a trend. And people almost wearing it as badges. But now, after the pandemic, where we were actually really intentionally had to ask ourselves, am I living holistically? Is this my life? Now we will see who emerges authentically of saying, this is the way I want to lead. This is a lifestyle. This is a way. This is the way. And now applying that to our earth and being mindful of, I hope that now, kind of being away from all the sensory stimulation, that when we do emerge, as one emerges after a sound bath, this heightened sensitivity will make us realize it's time to be more active or change, not just talk the talk, but actually walk the walk as this new summer comes. And as Adrian said, in California, we feel it. We know something is changing. And so my work is about just kind of adding that heightened awareness through a beautiful means and sound, so that others can just kind of be more mindful and aware.
Nalani, I think of course, always have more things to say, but I think that's a really beautiful place to just transition into the sound bath so that people can really be in that space. And if you want, we invite you to close your eyes and just enjoy it, but also you could add things in the chat that really are things that you're doing to connect to the earth, that your organization is doing to hold up sustainability goals. Things that you've been thinking about, intentions even that you have, you could add those to the chat. I think that would be a beautiful way to kind of echo and think about and honor things that we're already doing to honor our earth. And thank you so much. I'll just turn it back over to you.
Thank you.
And you can go full screen now with Nalani.
Last thing I will say is for this sound bath, I was listening to one of the other panels regarding arts and funding. And if anything, this pandemic has really, this global experience has shown me, and I ask the communities and activists and people with the means to help take this moment to see how the arts and the spiritual arts, the beauty, is essential to our humanity and thriving. And with that said, I would love to bring you into this moment of connecting to your environment, to your body, using sound. So if you'd like to just take a moment to get into a comfortable position, if you're in a chair, or if you have a moment to lay down somewhere, or if you've had headphones, feel free to just take a couple seconds to settle into your space. Again, my name is Nalani Hernandez Melo, and it is my privilege and honor to play these bowls for you today. I will be chanting in Spanish, and while I'm chanting, I am calling the elements and calling ancestors and guides and energies, whoever you work with, to come into this space, come into our homes, come into this portal, virtual portal, and to invite them to activate our bodies, to remind us of the elements that we have within our bodies, so that we can go out into our earth, into our communities, and recognize and see where our earth or our community needs that extra love and attention, so that we do have a beautiful space and energy to give back to the generations that are coming before us. So taking 3 deep breaths, allow your eyes to slowly close. And as you begin to take those breaths, allow any lingering weight in your body to just float and slide down. The beautiful thing about sound baths is that they're the easiest meditation, because all I ask you to do is to open your ears, your mind, and your heart to listen with intention, and allow yourself to see what happens in your body as you listen to these sounds. So taking 3 more breaths here. Let us begin. And as with this new world that we live in, allow everything in your surroundings to become part of this soundscape. Allow the cars to become a rushing river. Allow the wind. Allow the voices. Allow it all to just flow. Take 3 deep breaths here. So taking 3 deep breaths here. We gently and humbly bring a close to this beautiful summit. Allow those lingering vibrations and sounds to come and float over you. Your eyes are closed. Flutter them open. Thank you so much for allowing me to share these songs and these moments with you. And I hope that these vibrations are welcomed into your bodies and into your homes. And allow yourself to open to the beauty and the magic of art and our earth and our humanity and human connection with one another. We have the power to bring more beauty and activate our communities and to help each other thrive through this beautiful magic that we are all able to make and create. So thank you so much. And I will pass this over to the summit. And again, it has been a pleasure and an honor to share this with you. Have a beautiful weekend.